Today's video is sponsored by Brilliant, but more on that a little later on. This is Bluffside Crossing, a city that I abandoned for 847 days before coming into town as fast as a freight train and blasting away anything in my path. And in the previous episodes, we took this bit of jank from this to this, and made Thomas happy with rail grades that won't cause a derailment. And after the previous episode, we had a stream where we fixed traffic by creating these custom interchanges. And this bridge, though it isn't as nice as the one that we created in 15 seconds flat.
Good night, sweet prince.
And speaking of things that are gone, this fishing village is now gone post-stream too. Sorry, Mulligan, we'll get this fixed. But even with those fixes, we're just getting started. And in today's episode, we're gonna focus on the Hillcrest neighborhood, fixing the jank and expanding a bit. To do this, we're gonna use Move It in ways that I'm not sure it's ever been used before. This is going to be an exciting test of the raw power of this mod and a showcase of the very best of what it can do. And we'll make one major improvement to the previous build, so stay tuned to see what we improve. And if Move It is your favorite mod, hit the like button. And if another mod is your favorite, hit the like button for that too, and let me know how you feel in the comments. Or if you're just wondering why I'm not showing pictures of Banjo, drop an emoji for the sake of engagement, and maybe I'll do so in the next one. And without any further ado, let's jump right in. Up until this point in the series, whenever we have a problem with terrain, we've just taken out our sledgehammer, blown the neighborhood up, and started over. And honestly, it's given us some pretty good results. I love the way that this neighborhood looks now, and I love the way that this neighborhood over here looks now. But here's the thing. I think that we can operate with a bit more finesse and come up with something that looks just as nice as these neighborhoods. But we've got to use Move It to our advantage. So that is going to be my goal today. So to begin, I want to peel back the layers on this neighborhood. So we're going to pop into Move It, and I want to basically get rid of all of the buildings. But I don't want to delete them. I want to make it so that I can bring it back when I'm ready. So we'll go into our marquee selection tool, select all of these buildings. I'm going to go into the toolbox, other tools. We're going to export the selection. We have our Hillcrest buildings. We'll hit export, and there it is, saved in our list with a timestamp. So we can bring these back whenever we're ready. So we're going to delete them all with our bulldoze function. We're doing this because I want to be able to fix the terrain. And before we can do that, we have to have an idea of what this land looks like. So now we can see it very plainly. We can see where our roads are, and we can see where we've really disrespected the topography. So next, I want to basically draw an outline of where our city is. I'm going to come into the landscaping menu, and I want to pick a tree that I know is not located anywhere within the build. So we'll go with this new California palm. I'm using this to draw lines for where I want to improve the terrain in the future. So I know that we have to basically flatten to out here, and we'll pull this all the way around. Now, the reason why I'm using this palm tree is afterwards, I'll be able to select this in Move It using the picker within Move It, and I should be able to eliminate just this one tree. And now we peel back the layer once more. But this time I want to get rid of just roads. So we're going to select nodes and segments. Now we've got to be careful with this one, because if we're not careful, we'll get rid of things that we don't actually intend to get rid of. So again, we are in our marquee selection tool, nodes and segments selected. We're going to carefully select the things that we want to export. And now once again, in our other tools, we will export this selection. This time as Hillcrest roads. And once again, we bulldoze. And now we will level our terrain. So I want to pick a fairly normal height. I think this is probably it right here. Right mouse click that, and we're going to pull that all the way out to our tree line. Now I'm going to get cute, and it's probably not very smart. But I want to see if we can terrace some of this. So I'm not 100% sure where that road was, but I know that these trees were in the center of that couplet. So hopefully if we terrace from there, we'll be all right. So I'm going to grab this lowest height, and I'm going to back this up. And this will likely mean that we're changing our roadway network. But what I'm thinking is, rather than having all of these different heights, we're going to have two. We'll have this height down here and then this one up here, and we will build some cliffs. And that's how we'll resolve some of these challenges here. Now, this opens up an opportunity for us, because I think that if we are smart about this, we can open up additional land for development. And you'd think you're grabbing the soil from up here and pushing it down here, creating new land. Okay, so I've created pads for things, and you can see the different terrain heights, and you can kind of get a feel for how this might develop. So now we need to make this actually look like it's been graded, and a big part of that's going to be using the slope terrain tool and taking our strength way down. So for here, for instance, I know that this area up here is more or less set. There's obviously a couple of lumpies and bumpies that we'll want to deal with. So we'll slope from here. We want this to be the same width as the highway, more or less, and I'll harden this up. Actually, for the sloping of the terrain tool, and really, I think that the couplet is the only place where this really matters. We'll fix the rest on our own. So now we at least know that for the first time, our main road won't be completely janky. Now we need to figure out the rest. And here's where we should take our brush way down and start to soften the terrain just a bit. I think we're ready to bring our roads back. So for that, we got pop back into Move It, go into our other tools, and we import this time, and we just restore our roads. I'm restoring them because I want them to come back exactly where they were. And you can see everything is right back in the right spot. The nodes are reconnected, and I don't want to deselect yet. That's going to be really key. You can see it's actually at the exact same terrain heights as before. So now we go back into Move It, and we go into Height Tools, and we take our selection and we adjust it to the terrain height. Oh, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. We can also see that some things didn't go quite to plan. So now's where we take out, instead of our sledgehammer, we'll just gingerly pop through here and get rid of a couple of things. And now we've got some trickier spots. So we have a grid right here that probably shouldn't be a grid. So it's time to break it up. Now, I really have always disliked these. This was basically my solution to not having cul-de-sac bulbs, so I think we probably want to rethink this, and this is one of the areas where I'm going to basically say no right now. And with that, I think that we are in a pretty good place to begin re-importing our buildings. So we go into Move It, we'll go into our other tools, import selection, and we will restore our buildings. These take just a moment longer, but boy, it looks great except for the heights. So once again, we will go into our height tools, set these to terrain height, and we are looking good now. And here we are back in business with our university, and all of the students can get their education once again. But what about someone who is not at the university but still wants to continue being a lifelong learner? That's where today's video sponsor, Brilliant, comes into play. Brilliant is the best way to learn complex topics like math, data science, and computer science interactively wherever you are. And the best part is that Brilliant customizes its lessons to fit your needs and lets you explore at your own pace, even providing helpful hints and step-by-step instructions if you get stuck. My kids just started the school year, and it's been an excellent reminder of the importance of continually pushing myself to learn. And recently, I've been enjoying a data analysis course that teaches me how to better present data visually. But you don't have to become a data visualization wizard. You can try any of the thousands of lessons that Brilliant has to offer free for 30 days. Just visit brilliant.org/cityplannerplays or click on the link below, and the first 200 of you will get 20% off an annual subscription to Brilliant. And a huge thank you to Brilliant for sponsoring today's video. So we've got all of our buildings back, but I'm not really thrilled about what has happened here. It looks pretty bad. So most of these buildings on the slope are actually pretty important buildings, and it failed. It was a valiant effort, but nonetheless a failure. So what we're gonna do is basically disrespect everything here. We're gonna marquee selection our buildings, nodes, and segments, and I'm gonna do what I probably should have done in the first place. Select all of these, Control H this to something that I know is this flat height here, and then we'll flatten the rest of the terrain. So this is another approach that we could have taken. Now, we have Rico on, and it's going to preserve these buildings unless we get rid of them. And obviously, some of these buildings no longer have roads associated with them. So I'm going to remove some of these buildings that should no longer be there. And then I think we need to take uses like this that were really not in the most appropriate locations and maybe find a better home for them. So I'm going to take this Institute of Creative Arts and just move it on over here. And then I want to say that these sports facilities were supposed to be associated with them, so we will also move these. Now, before we get too far along, I do think that I probably should get rid of these palm trees. They were there as guides and shouldn't be something that we accidentally leave behind, but I will absolutely do that. We'll just go into move it, and this time I want to select picker and trees. And then I'll select this eyedropper and select the tree, and now that's the only thing selected. And I can basically go ham with this, select the entire area and delete all the palm trees. And then areas like this, we need to completely rethink. Homes are just falling off the cliff. This is terrible. Now I'm going to do something that might be risky, and I want to change what Rico is doing. I'm tired of deleting all these buildings, and I think that the best course of action for me will be to let them disappear. So we'll go into Rico Revisited, and right now we're allowing growable buildings to survive outside of the correct zone. I'm going to get rid of that. And all of those buildings should now disappear. Now, before everything disappears, I need to think about what this zoning was and replace all the zoning that I actually want to keep. So I'm going to basically redraw in my roadway network the way I want on pause, and then we will zone. We will lose some things here, but many things will remain. And I've decided to rethink this whole area. So basically, we have the highway coming into this roundabout. I don't think that that is necessary. So I don't love that the highway basically becomes a local road, but I think that that is a transition that we had here, and that's a transition that we're going to live with. So what we'll do here is just join these two roads up, and then I very well may just convert this, and that's actually what I'll do. I'll convert this into a normal road, and this actually respects the topography fairly well. So now we've basically got to look through here and try to add all of our zoning back. And truthfully, there are some pretty ugly places that maybe we don't want to add the zoning back anyway. Even though we had our row of trees, we are still on the cliffside here. That's just not a great look. And now let's add all of our zoning back in, and we'll be right back. And that was actually a significantly more challenging and lengthy process than I expected it to be. All that said, I've rezoned everything, and I want to show you a couple of things. In this area in particular, I'm not 100% sure about what I did here. I've got random little buildings through here, and I might have been taking a bit of inspiration from where I went to undergrad, but I no longer like it. So what we're going to do is give these buildings a bit more space. Once we resume, all the buildings around here will despawn. And then over here, I moved some of these buildings around that are going to disappear to the cul-de-sac bulbs. And I use the export trick once again, because we'll just re-import these after we adjust our Rico settings. Now we just need to let this thing run and see what happens. For the most part, things are filling in pretty nicely up here. I am very curious though. There are other parts of the city where we may have lost some buildings. I'm hoping it's not all that much, but let's see the damages. We actually have a significant rebound in our population, which makes me feel really good. I was nervous there for a moment. All that said, we do need to go back into our Rico settings and re-enable things so that we can plop down our cul-de-sac bulbs. Now that that is re-enabled, I should be able to simply import the selection once again, restore all the cul-de-sac bulbs, and they will stay for good. And now is when I admit my deepest, darkest secrets to you. I saved all the cul-de-sac bulbs up here, but I didn't do so around the rest of the map. So I had to go and take a look, and I was prepared for the worst, but thankfully, they're all still intact. So not 100% sure why these didn't despawn, but they didn't. And I'm a firm believer that when you're given a win, you don't ask questions sometimes, you're just happy. So that's what I'm gonna do. And now that our old part of our build is restored and in a much better place, we're gonna move on to some transportation network improvements. There are a few different things that I want to accomplish with the transportation network fixes. The main thing is to make sure that all of our grades make sense here. And then the other is to establish some local connections throughout this area so that we don't just have the two ways to get here. Right now we have the highway in this one, but we probably should have more because in the event of an emergency, there would be a lot of problems here. So let's take out our network multi-tool. What I'm going to do is basically adjust one side of this, get it going really well, and then we're going to delete the other side and clone it. And you can see this is exactly why I was concerned. 12.7% grade on a bump on a bridge. This is not a good thing. There would be people falling off. This is always rolling the dice, playing with fire. But let's pull it all the way back and see what happens. It's honestly pretty darn good. So now we will get rid of this. And then we'll go into our network multi-tool into create parallel mode. And I'm going to take it to likely about right here. Tab this over, and I just want to see how well this fits. It's honestly pretty good. And I'm going to keep these fairly tight. We'll go 25 meters and we'll drop it right down. And then I'm going to extend this out just a little ways and upgrade this to a super predictable normal road. And then we'll just use our create curve mode to link these up. And before we move on, I'm going to get the other side fixed as well. And there we go. That should be pretty good. Let's get some of these segments upgraded to bridges though. And I've given a lot of thought as to what to add as the divider because these roads are so close together. And I think we're going to go with this new suburban fence that we have that was recently added to the vanilla game. This is the perfect asset for us because it means that we can still use the create parallel mode. So we should be able to just come up here and start adding it. We'll center this nicely or as best we can. And it looks like 14 does a pretty good job. And then we should be able to pull this all the way up here. And then I also want to add that to the outside here because I do have concerns that people would fall off here. Yeah, honestly, that's not too bad. I'm pretty pleased with that. And then lastly, I do want to soften the terrain a bit here. The primary reason I'm doing this is when you look at this from far away, if you have the cliff sides right on the side here, there'll be visual tearing. I don't want that. So I will set the slope mode here, slope up to that top height, same thing on this side. And then we can just taper along the edge. So now it's not so jaggy and we won't have any tearing when we look at it from across the build. So now we just have to do the same thing in the rest of the highway. And honestly, that is a pretty significant improvement there. You can see that the freeway is just a little ways away and it just makes a ton more sense. And if you're going to blast out, I think that that is the type of improvement you might see. So now let's shift gears over to the madness. And this is that tearing I was talking about. You can see, especially if we take away the contour view, that as you pull away from this, you get some of those jagged edges. And that is 100% not pre-grading this area. So we're going to need to give that some thought because my goal is to not see any of that stuff by the time that we're done. So I'm going to begin by taking our sledgehammer out here. And there we go. All of the transportation facilities have now been removed and we're going to basically start fresh. And this was a multi-use path and that's what we're going to go with again. So this is going to be all about sloping our terrain. We want a small brush size and a fairly modest brush strength. Maybe we'll go around 30 this time. And I'm going to begin by creating a pad here. And then we'll go up every few meters. And we are probably going to have to switch back this more than we did before because it was just a bit extreme. So we're gonna go with this bicycle and pedestrian path. So for this, I wanna make sure that I'm on the ground. I wanna make sure that I'm using the freeform tool. And I also wanna make sure that most of my snap twos outside of maybe angle are off. And there we go. This is not perfect just yet, but I'm kind of curious as to what our slopes look like. So let's just go through. I converted this little bit right here, which is kind of illustrative of what the rest of the path looks like. And this was a segment that I basically pulled up a bunch of soil for where I shouldn't have. So we'll have a bridge here. It'll look neat and it'll be more functional. And it's about 12%. So obviously that's not wonderful, but I think it's a lot better than not having it at all. So that's kind of what we're going to roll with here. I'm going to add a path connection here, or a crossing rather, and then we need to find a way into the rest of our bike network, which basically looks as if it ends right about here. So we'll just convert that, and that should be a pretty good spot for us. I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup on here, and there we go. Same strategy as last time on the highway, just pulling things back a bit, and it looks pretty darn good. So for the roadway, we're going to change this quite significantly from what we did last time. So rather than trying to fight this path, we'll come up over here and maybe meet up a bit further down here. So to begin, let's grab this road and just start running it along the side of the mountain base. And I think that perhaps here is where we start heading up the side of the hill. So just like I've done in the past, we're going to continue to use our slope terrain tool and our level terrain tool to create a path up the side of the hill. And we have basically taken this, and I wanted to stretch it out way further so that our incline up to here is just much more gradual. And I like the result. I again added a bit of a bridge here so that we could make it up this segment right here. Probably could have had a couple of tunnel segments if we wanted to as well, but I think that this looks completely fine. I'm concerned that there is no other way to get to places like the electrical plant or even this fishing village short of hopping on the highway. So that's what we're going to focus on, is adding a couple of local connections. So for instance, I think right here is a good spot. We're going to turn our contours on. I'm going to bridge across here. And then we are going to make a connection right over here. And we'll let the terrain guide us. So this will get us to our fishing village and the power plant if we get this right. And these are the sorts of connections that I think that we are sorely missing throughout this entire region. This is the reason why we're so dependent on our highways. And you can already see that there are vehicles taking this, which shows that there is some level of need for this facility. Now, because this is a smaller highway, I'm not going to get crazy about slopes. Now, I think you could add a whole bunch of connections, but these are pretty good for now. And we will add one more from here when we fix up our fishing village. Oh, our sad little fishing village. Mulligan, I am so sorry that this happened. We are going to fix this. It's going to be very easy because we have Move It. All we have to do is hop into our marquee selection tool, make sure that everything is available. We'll highlight it all, and then we'll just reset the objects. And that's always a little bit nerve-wracking, but we are in a good place. Now, this fishing village really has nothing wrong with it. I think it's a perfectly fine fishing village, but if there's anything I do want to fix, it's that we need to have another way out from here. I thought that I had created another outlet. I somehow recall there being an outlet right about here, but for whatever reason, it's no longer here. So we are going to attempt to make that. I'm going to try to go fast with this one though, and that might be a fool's errand. We'll find out. We're going to test our work and see how it turned out. I think there might be some rough spots. And by rough spots, I mean it all might be kind of rough. But at some point in time, you've got to give yourself a little bit. And it's really these spots right here that are the 17s and the 19% that I'm really unhappy with. So if we can tamp those down just a bit, I think we will have accomplished 90% of what we wanted to in about 20% of the time. And honestly, this isn't that bad. You don't always have to have the perfect solution. Sometimes you just need to have a solution that's good enough. That was kind of rough. Now, this bit's going to be considerably more challenging. Bluntly, this should have probably been a bridge right here. So we will fix some of that. But then we're really looking at another parallel bridge facility or something of that nature, unless we basically send this one back down. And that's probably the most cost-effective way of handling this. So that is precisely what I am going to do. Now, the last thing that we really have to do to make this right is to separate this, give a bit of separation so we don't have tearing. I took a lot of liberties with the terrain here, but truthfully, I think that it is a very nice connection and I'm pleased with how it has turned out. And I do want to compare that and contrast it to what we've done over here, because this is the older connection and I'm very curious to see how it's held up. Yeah, there are some things happening here. But honestly, I think I did an all right job on this one back in the day. So Bill from the past, not too bad, not too bad. And just minor fixes around the edges, but I think this is a huge improvement. So let's move on to our Hillcrest expansion. This is going to be something fairly quick and dirty, and the kind of thing where it's just a whole bunch of lower density residential, the kind of thing you might expect to see in hills like this. So for the most part, the idea here is going to be to follow the terrain. So this is the general layout for this area. I tried to follow the terrain as best I can, and now is where we need to do a little bit of cleanup. So I want to find areas like this where we have little hills and just go through with the network multi-tool and flatten those areas out. And then with move it, where we have dips like this, these are areas that we would pull up. So we're also going to be creating a number of cul-de-sacs, and I just want to make sure that none of the slopes are so crazy that they're not really bobbable. So I think for the most part, we're in a good spot. Then also, we will create some building pads in some of these locations. So maybe a brush size of like 85, and then we just follow the road to create some building pads. And in some cases, it's actually going up and down, right mouse click, left mouse click, so you can create those building pads. And we're getting close to being able to zone this, but I do want to make sure that our district covers this entire area because I want to get this exact same theme that was over here. And truthfully, we didn't even cover this entire area. So a little bit of an unforced error, but we'll get it rectified. So this district, Park Heights, has the European suburbia theme attached to it, and that is kind of what I'm interested in seeing spring up over here. So what we're gonna do now is just blanket this entire area with residential, and after that, I'm gonna go through the cul-de-sac bulbs and fix those. And now that we have that done, we've got to put water pipes underneath the road right where they belong. And I've decided to fix all the water pipes as well. And we have quite a bit of development that we're going to be waiting for to come in. So I'm going to let this go for a few minutes and we will see what this looks like when it's done. And this took considerably longer than I was expecting it to, about an hour, but we are properly filled in. So that leaves me with one goal at this point. I want to get the lumpies and bumpies out of the way and fill in the ends of the cul-de-sac bulbs. So I'm going to grab random homes and basically use Move It to copy and paste them in at the end of the cul-de-sac bulbs. There we go, all of our cul-de-sac bulbs in place. Now it's time to do a little bit of cleanup. And the funny thing is, as buildings come in, you see some stuff like this. So a lot of terraforming at this point, but little stuff, not big stuff. And we can't come at this with a big brush size or a lot of strength. Otherwise, we'll break everything. And this isn't perfect by any means, but we can fix the rest of this with landscaping. And what I've basically done is try to do the exact same thing I do with roads. Come up, spread out the landscaping so that you have a flat foundation for the house, and then come and taper the edges. And I think the net result is it looks pretty good. And if you look at our contour view, you can see there's a lot going on here. You've really got to make sure that you space the homes appropriately, but if you do that, you're really going to be in a good spot to create a good hillside neighborhood. And with all of this complete, I think it's time to start landscaping. Now for our landscaping section, we're going to start right here because while that big time lapse was occurring, I noticed some shenanigans happening over here with our passenger harbor. And the main problem was that our shipping routes were too close to the harbor. So I just backed them out a little ways and now everything seems to be working well. We have passengers that are being dropped off. The ships are coming and going. Things are working well. So always good to keep an eye on things as you make big changes. And I guess we have accidents. The other reason I want to be over here is that I want to steal some quote unquote normal looking landscaping. So we're going to grab just a small section and we'll control C this within move it. And this is what we're going to use to decorate over here. I want to make sure that I do not have tree anarchy on. And then I'm going to turn on the contour view for this. You know, this seems a little bit too thick for me. So what I'm going to try to do instead is I'm going to pop into forestry brush, take the brush strength down, and then I want to have a brush size about the same size as this. And I'm going to right mouse click this to remove some of these. And that seems like a nicer brush for me. There we are. That was a ton of landscaping, but I think it makes a huge difference. So I took that original little square of trees and spread it all over the place. And then at the very end, I went through and thinned it out with the forestry brush, took it on a huge brush strength and just thinned it out. And I really love the effect here. It makes it feel like this has been carved into a forest, which is really what is supposed to be happening in Bluffside Crossing, a real dense forest that this community has been basically carved right into. So I really love the effect that this gives. And with that, there's only one more thing left to do, and that's take inventory of what we've done with a brief city tour. Before we go, there's one really important thing that we need to take care of, and that's this. This is our fire protection, and it's not good. And we've been adding a lot of trees over the last couple of episodes. And if we're not careful, we're going to burn this whole place down. You've been seeing fires all episode, and that is because we don't have adequate fire protection. So let's take care of that. So to begin, I want to take a look at our fire coverage. And I know that we didn't have the higher capacity fire helicopters when Bluffside Crossing was built. So we're probably going to want to add those now. In fact, I only think that we have one. I want to say it's right about here. Yeah, that's not going to be good enough. I'd imagine if we take a look at this, we got 3 helicopters. One of them's already in use right now. Let's get rid of this and replace this with this higher capacity fire helicopter depot. This has 10 capacity, so we're more than doubling our capacity. So that's huge, but it's not the end of the road. We've also got to add a bunch of fire watchtowers. This is something I didn't do. To put together this kind of a forestry industry without any fire protection is asking for trouble. In fact, I think I already see some trouble. And yes, indeed, we've got a burnt down building. So I think that we don't actually have a disaster response unit in all of Bluffside Crossing. So we will add that, but now is not the time. So we'll reset the object for now. And I didn't see that. You didn't see that. Everything's good. And the funny thing is, even with all of these watchtowers, it's still not enough. I'm going to add one more. It seems like crazy overkill, but we'll go for it. And that helps some. So throughout the rest of this area, I think I'm going to come up to about this level and add these, and it should make a huge difference in ensuring that our whole map isn't burning down constantly. We may also need to add another fire helicopter depot on this side of town, the west side, I guess, or depending on the map orientation. We'll call it the west side. And I placed what can only be reasonably described as an obscene number of fire watchtowers, but we're not going to burn down. Funny thing is, our fire hazard is still incredibly high. So I think it only makes sense to add a second fire helicopter depot. We'll again go with one of these large ones. We've got the money to handle this, and it's important enough that I think that we should. We've got the start of a little city services center down here, so I'm going to add this to it. I do have plans to improve this area and fix it up, and right now it's kind of just the land of misfit toys. We will fix that, but not today. Things are looking pretty good. I'm going to let this run for like 3 minutes. Oh, I don't even need to. We are on fire, but look at all of these helicopters. They're going nuts over here, and that's what I wanted to see. So with that, I think that we're going to leave it here. I really hope that you've enjoyed this one. If you did, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. And I really want to thank you for your time today. There's a million things that you could have been doing, and you decided to hang out with me and watch fires, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.